And Sandra introduced me earlier, but just in case you missed the introduction, my name is Brian Smith. And before we get started, I want to get started with a very short story about who I am and how I came to be here today. So I grew up as a child with a great fear of death. Religious beliefs like original sin and hell actually tormented me. And that fear of death, that I would actually even term thanatophobia, which is a hard word to say, led me to a fascination with studying death. And I've studied death for most of my life. Suddenly in 2015, my daughter, who was then 15 years old, Shannon Lane, she passed away in the spirit. And this is my daughter, Shannon, behind me. I was lost. I was devastated. I really no longer wanted to be on this earth. And I know that for anyone who's lost a child or someone as close as a child, it could be a spouse, could be a parent, I know you understand what that means. It's as if half of you left with them, and all of me wanted to be with her. All I wanted was to be with her again. But I knew I had other responsibilities. I had a wife who's actually on here today. I have another daughter. I've got family. I've got friends. And I quickly realized that I couldn't just sit down and die. I had to keep moving forward. So what I did after Shayna passed is I accelerated my studies. And since that day, almost 8 years ago, I've dedicated my life to learning more about the afterlife. And I've learned a lot from our friend Sandra here today. And I'm grateful to be here. And I've taken what I've learned and I've integrated it into my work for like the last 4 years. In the last 4 years, I've been teaching others about the afterlife. And today, as Sandra said, I'm the host of the Grief to Growth podcast. I'm a life coach. I'm a certified grief educator, and I teach something called positive intelligence. I do host a podcast and a YouTube channel, and I write about what I've learned. And I recently launched a program that incorporates all these principles I've learned into a curriculum that I do got my clients through. So I say this to say, I speak to you today as someone who's made this my lifelong study. This is my purpose. Now, I also want to say, I'm a chemical engineer by training. I'm a very rational person. When I was a little kid, I used to take things apart just to put them back together again and see how they worked. Like Sandra, I'm a very rational and a skeptic person. I'm not really woo-woo. I study things. I don't take any of this for granted, and I don't take it on faith. I think faith is great, but I'm the kind of person I need to know. I just can't just believe. So I've studied science, I've studied philosophy, I've studied religion, and also subjective personal experiences like out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, mediumship, afterlife communications, etc. There's a whole body of evidence that leads to the conclusions that I'm going to speak to you about today. So where I sit today, I am 100% confident that we don't die, as Sandra says. I'm 100% confident that we are spiritual beings having a temporary human experience. But this experience, while it is temporary, can sometimes be overwhelming, and I acknowledge that. And sometimes we need to be reminded of the greater reality. The overarching truth of our true temporary physical residence is where we are. So now getting on to the topic of the day. The topic of the day is home. And when I say home, that's not with the lowercase h, but home with an uppercase H. So what is home? Well, I've been on this planet long enough to have had several homes. I've had homes in different cities, homes in different states. I've lived in apartments. I've lived in houses where I grew up, the place I grew up with my parents. I've had temporary homes, like when I went away to college and I lived in dorms. And even more temporary homes, like, for example, when you go on vacation. If you think about it, when you go on vacation, you stay in a hotel for like a week. After a week or so, you're coming back to that room. That room kind of feels almost like home for a little while. And then you remember your true home is back in the city where you live. But even none of these places are our true home with a capital H. Now, sometimes, even when we're on vacation, even when we're out having a good time, you get homesick. And even though you're intentionally away from home, you kind of want to be back to where you were. You want to sleep in your own bed. You miss having your own stuff. And even though you're away on your own volition, you long for home. Now, again, home, I think, is relative. When I first moved into the house I'm living in now, where I'm sitting right now, I thought of my old house as home for a while. And then I got used to this being home. And now this is home. When my daughter moved away from college, or we moved away to go to college, I remember one time she said she's going back home and she was going back to her dorm. And it kind of jarred me because I'm like, well, that's not your home. And my point is here, once we're in this physical place that we're in right now, once we're in the bodies that we're in right now, for a while, we start to think of this as home, but it's not really our home. What this world really is, I liken this to a physical, like a walk in the physical is a term that Christian Sundberg uses. This is a temporary experience. It's a trip away from home. You can think of it as an adventure. You could think of it as an excursion. You could think of it as a learning experience, like going away to college or going away to school. But we live in a virtual reality. We live in a simulation. And I was speaking with someone the other day, and they said, "Are you talking about simulation theory, which is a theory that physicists propose?" Well, for me, I don't even think it's theory anymore. This is reality. This physical world that we live in, of course, is very real while we're in it. But physical is a matter of perspective. We happen to live in this world and we think of it as physical, but it's really just mental, or not just mental. It's really mental. It's consciousness. Now, my thinking has been greatly influenced by people like Bernardo Castro, who wrote a great book called Why Materialism is Baloney, and others that have come to the same conclusion by observing reality and using logic, that what we see is not as it appears to be. I've learned in recent years that everything is consciousness. Everything exists within consciousness. And there are different levels of reality, if you will. They're kind of nested in each other, but none of them is actually physical. Physicists have even gotten to the point where they tell us that what we perceive as solid, all the stuff around us, is not really solid. That the chair, for example, that I'm sitting in, the chair that you're sitting in, might feel solid, but they're really vibrating masses of energy. As our technology has gotten better and better, we've gotten deeper and deeper looking into the physical, we realize that what we thought was solid at one time really isn't. When I was in college many, many years ago, we thought that atoms were the smallest individual thing, or smartest indivisible thing. And then we realized there were electrons and neutrons. And then we found out those are made of neutrinos and quarks and all these little tiny particles. But even as we've gotten even deeper into this, we realize that electrons themselves aren't even particles. They're waves of potential. And at the very smallest level, these little things we call particles are actually vibrating bits of energy. Now, for example, a hydrogen atom itself is 99 point, and I'm not going to say it all, but 99.1296 empty space. Everything around us that we perceive as solid is not really solid. So the reason I say this is kind of a projection of a deeper level, or of a consciousness that we live in. So why would we come here? Why would we come to this place that's not our home? Well, we come here for a time to experience. We come here to learn, to grow. We come here to learn compassion. We come here to learn love. We come here, as I said, to have experiences. So someone recently asked me, if we're perfect in the afterlife, or before we come here, why do we have to come here to grow? Well, I would ask you, what does it mean to be perfect? What is there that couldn't be improved, that couldn't get better? And are we omniscient in the afterlife? Some say we are. Some say that when we die, people who had near-death experiences might say, well, suddenly I knew everything. I knew all the secrets of the universe. But that is actually intellectual knowledge. To be truly omniscient, to truly know everything, you'd have to know what everything is like. So some things you can only learn experientially. To be an omniscient being, to know everything, you'd have to experience pretty much everything. For example, if you're an omniscient being and knew everything, you wouldn't know what it's like to not be able to speak English. If you are never uncomfortable, you couldn't know what it's like to be cold. To know what it's like to receive mercy, you have to be in a position where you need mercy. So hopefully you get my meaning. We need to have these experiences to understand what it's like to have these experiences. And we, my friends, are fractals of a greater consciousness. We are here on a mission to have these experiences, to grow that consciousness. Now, some of us were taught growing up believing that there was a God who was perfect and self-contained and knew everything, and God didn't need anything. I don't think that's necessarily the way that that level of consciousness is. That the consciousness that we are part of is constantly expanding. It's constantly growing, and it's actually growing through our experiences. That reality, that consciousness, that source, whatever you want to call it, it actually needs us to grow. As we grow, it grows. And as we grow our individual consciousness, we grow the collective consciousness. Now, we come here only for a short time. The reason why we're able to leave where we go and come here is because when we're there, we know this is a short experience. We know this experience is temporal. But when we're here, we forget that. And we get attached to things here. But remember, everything here fades away. All the money that we accumulate, the homes that we accumulate, the cars that we rent, that we buy, we're only renting. In fact, our very bodies, we're only renting. We're only going to have these bodies for a short time. And these bodies will fade away as well. But what's eternal is the result of the experiences that we have, the love that we gain, the wisdom that we gain. That goes back with us. And that's the only thing that goes with us. So I mentioned we come here to improve consciousness. And I mentioned we come here to improve consciousness so consciousness can improve itself and improve ourselves. But there's actually more. When I talk to people about this idea, they say, well, I would never sign up for this. There's no way I would sign up to come to this place. This place is stupid. This place is crazy. So let's maybe look at this from a different perspective. I'll give you a couple of examples. Now, when I was younger, I mentioned earlier, I'm a chemical engineer. I went away to college and I actually paid money to get my degree. And it was hard. I chose chemical engineering partly because it was the hardest thing that I could go through. But I wanted to learn. I wanted to grow. And as I said, I paid money for that. Now, I also love like reality TV. I love to watch human nature. And there are a couple shows on reality TV, and one's called Naked and Afraid, and the other one's called Alone. And in these shows, they put themselves in extreme conditions. For example, in the show Naked and Afraid, they go into the wilderness wearing nothing. And I mean, they wear nothing. They have no clothes, no shoes, nothing. They get a bag and 2 items. Maybe they'll have a pot and a knife. And they try to survive for 21 days. Now, when I explain this program to people, they say, who are these crazy people that do this? They must be doing it for the money. Well, in that show, there actually is no money. There's no prize in the show, in that particular show. They do it for the adventure. They do it for the challenge. They do it to improve their skills. They make themselves uncomfortable on purpose to see how they stack up. The other show I mentioned earlier is called Alone. And in that sense, it's even more extreme. These people go to Canada in the winter with a few items. Now, they do have clothes and they have tents and things, but they're literally alone. They take a camera with them. They film themselves. There's no crew. There's no backup. There are bears. There are wolves. There are all kinds of predators. And they go out and they put themselves up against nature. And every time I've watched this show, every single contestant comes out changed. And I mean changed not just physically, because they lose a lot of weight, but they are changed mentally, spiritually, emotionally. The solitude that they go through, the hardship that they go through actually hones them into different people, and they're different for the rest of their lives. And the last example I'll give about the way we set up challenges for ourselves, today is Super Bowl Sunday. I love sports. I love watching people compete at anything. But have you ever thought about how silly sports are? That we go out, these big men, and they put on these pads and they hit each other and they tackle each other. And one team's trying to move the ball one way and the other team's trying to move the ball the other way. And it's all just fun, right? It's all just to see if we can do it. They risk life for them to do this. We pay money to watch it, all for the challenge. This is part of human nature. I think we seek challenges. So that's why we come here. Now, we often refer to the next life as the afterlife. And that's fine from the perspective of when we're here, right? This life is here, and then we have the afterlife. Now, more accurately, there's actually one life, and I've heard it termed the everlife. But I actually started calling this phase of life the between life. When we come here, it's between. We come from one place, we come here, and we go back to the same place. So this is really the between life. And the other day I was speaking with a gentleman, and we were talking about my daughter who had transitioned, and I like the term transitioned and graduated, and things that let us know that our loved ones don't truly die. And he used the term continuation day to describe the day my daughter passed in the spirit. And I love that term. She continues, just like Carly Simon mentioned in the song earlier, that what we see as death is only the limit of our sight. It's just the horizon. When a ship goes across the horizon, it doesn't disappear. It doesn't go away. It's just out of our sight. I've heard the term risen used to describe the dead. I love that term, risen. The other day, I heard someone use the term moved upstairs. All of these phrases remind us that this is not our real life, that this is not our home, that we each have our time to go through this, and then we each have our time to go home. We come here to go through these hardships. We come here to come out stronger. We come here to support each other and lean on each other as we make that journey home. So I'm not really an adventurous person. The other day, someone asked me a question like, what's the most adventurous thing you've ever done? And I really had to think about that because I don't like adventure. My answer was, it's probably scuba diving. I'm not into skydiving or extreme hiking or even running marathons. But I do want to say this to you. You may feel like you're not an adventurous person either. But if you're here, if you're listening to me, if you're within the sound of my voice, if you're on the planet Earth, you are an adventurous person. We are the baddest of the bads. We are the tough guys. People that choose to incarnate, we are pretty special people. Christian Sundberg, who I mentioned earlier, wrote a book called A Walk in the Physical, and he's got these pre-life memories or between life memories. And in his experience, he talks about being on the other side and what I would call the real life. And he's walking around one day, metaphorically speaking, and he comes across this being. This being was different. This being was like shiny and bright and just, exuding wisdom. And Christian wondered what made this being different. And what he realized when he asked the being was this being had a physical experience, had incarnated, and it had changed him. It had grown his capacity. It had grown his wisdom. It had grown his capacity to love. When I interviewed Natalie Sudman for my program, she talked about the perspective from the other side, their perspective of people that come to Earth. And this is what she had to say in her book, The Application of Impossible Things. This physical life is a unique experience, and it's entrancing from the perspective of expanded awareness. It is utterly lovely. It is deliciously strange. It's challenging and wildly exciting. The razor focus required to remain in the collective physical is intensely satisfying for our whole self, for our higher self. Physical reality, where we are, is a balancing trick, a performance high, an intensely concentrated speed test of complex skills. We are each an F-22 pilot flying 50 feet off the deck through an impossibly narrow canyon. That's what it's like to be in the physical, and that's what you and I are going through. So I say this to you, my friends, if you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're feeling lonely, if you're feeling homesick, it's okay. When I was a child, my favorite movie was The Wizard of Oz, and the song that Stephanie Mills sang is from the movie The Wiz, which came from The Wizard of Oz. That's probably why it's one of my all-time favorite songs. But when that movie came on, it came on once a year, and when I grew up, there was no DVR, there was no VCR. You either saw the movie or you missed it till the next year. And I always made sure I was in front of the TV that night that movie came on. And if you know the movie, if you remember in the movie, Dorothy is on an adventure. Dorothy is taking this adventure and she feels weak. She feels small. She feels powerless. And she meets these other beings that feel weak and they feel small and they're powerless. And they take this journey, and through the hardships that they face, they realize that the things that they were seeking were actually with them all along. They're seeking a brain, they're seeking a heart, they're seeking courage. And they have to go through these trials to actually exhibit these qualities. They have to go through these trials to actually understand that they already have them with them and to grow these qualities. But they take this journey. But if you remember at the end of the movie, Dorothy wakes up in her bed with her loved ones all around her. And she realized that it was, quote, just a dream. That's what this life is like. So I want to review the lyrics of the song by Stephanie Mills. And I'm just going to read a little bit of this. She says, "Oh, if you're listening, God, please don't make it hard to know if we should believe the things that we see. Tell us, should we try to stay or should we run away? Or will it be better just to let them be? Living here in this brand new world might be a fantasy, but it's taught me to love, and it's real to me. And I've learned we must look inside our hearts to find a world full of love, a world like yours, like mine, like home. When I think of home, my friends smiling down on me, giving me their energy. When I think of home, I think of a peaceful world and I enjoy all around. I think of a peaceful world and joy all around me. When I think of home and love that we can never share, and love that we share can never, never be taken away from me. When I think of home, I just sit down and think, and it gets down to my bones. When I think of home, I can hear my friends telling me, Stephanie, please sing my song. This is a strange place that we're in. This is a strange journey that we're on. And sometimes we forget while we're here. We forget we're surrounded by people that love us, or these people in spirit, our past loved ones, like my daughter, Shayna, our spirit guides, our families that we've left home that we don't even remember while we're in the physical. When we go home, we'll see them again and we'll say, oh yeah, I haven't seen you in a long time. Now, I'm about to wrap up here, and I want to leave you with a comment that I recently received from someone who had a near-death experience, and they posted this on my YouTube channel, and it just filled me with joy. It said, while I was there, I went way out into the cosmos, beyond the stars and the planet, to where it was total darkness. And though I could see perfectly, I was able to look back at myself from above. I was on tiptoe, leaning as far as possible over the edge of the wisdom of God, as one would go to a wall or as one would go to a well to gaze down into it as far as I could see. I was wearing blue jeans and I'm 23, though I was 57 at the time I died. And it had been years since I'd worn jeans. I was face to face, eye to eye when I was healed. Though I was first shown my family as forms, once together, we all had bodies and faces. And we loved as we were always meant to be, laughing from that deep place of joy and then knowing that we were safe no matter what. And I recalled trying to remember, what was it that ever made me feel unsafe? And I couldn't bring to mind one single thing. It's an awesome place of love and happiness because we are totally united in truth. So it's, again, we're here for a reason. If you're here today, you're here for a purpose. And I know it's a long journey, but it's a journey that's worth the adventure. It will pay off in the end in ways that we can't even comprehend at the moment. When you're feeling overwhelmed, remember the words of Ram Dass. We're all just walking each other home. So let's hold hands and make it together. So in that spirit, I'd like to offer a little gift to you. It's a short guide that I have on a few things that I've found that work for me when I'm in grief or actually at any time. So if you go to my website, www.grieftogrowth.com, that's grief, the numeral 2, growth.com/Sandra, you can download this guide for free. So thanks for being here. Thanks for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful Sunday.